I awoke, blinking against the blinding brightness that momentarily disoriented me about my surroundings. The intense light made it challenging to remember where I was, but that confusion was short-lived. Almost immediately, a sensation overwhelmed me, as if two coconuts had been discreetly placed on my chest. Was this what it felt like to have a substantial bust? I had accomplished it. I had truly achieved it. Now, I proudly possessed a pair of 34DD breasts, though they were currently a bit sore. My attempt to sit up straight against the hospital bed's backrest proved painful, a reminder of the surgeon's warning about tenderness during the initial week. I hadn't anticipated this level of discomfort. How would I even manage to get out of bed? A compassionate nurse noticed my struggle and gently propped me up, advising me to rest. With a reassuring smile, she complimented my appearance. Did I really look great? I pondered, or had I made a grave mistake? Lost in my thoughts, I reflected on my high school years when my insecurities had frequently consumed me. I wasn't unattractive by any means, but had I been the girl with the smallest chest in school? Undoubtedly, I had been, and it had plagued me. One vivid memory surfaced. Brooklyn, the school's most popular girl, had invited us all to her lavish Sweet 16 pool party. I had been so anxious that everyone would notice my barely there chest that I had resorted to stuffing my younger brother's Play-Doh into my bikini top. It was the closest approximation to breasts that I could find. I had even convinced myself they looked reasonably convincing when I nervously examined myself in the mirror before the party. Little did I anticipate Drake sneaking up behind me and pushing me into the pool. My makeshift Play-Doh breasts had promptly abandoned their post, landing with an embarrassing thud on the pool's surface. I recall the overwhelming horror and shame that engulfed me as my makeshift breasts sank to the pool's bottom. That moment marked a profound turning point in my life, one I could never quite overcome. The teasing became relentless, even from my supposed friends who never let me forget the Play-Doh incident, gifting me the modeling clay every birthday, and Brooklyn's taunting words continued to haunt me. Do you know, Lily, if you're so desperate for a fuller bust, why not just consider surgery? She had once remarked callously. I mean, if I were as flat as a pancake as you are, I'd definitely go for it. So there I lay on that cosmetic surgery ward bed, staring at my newly acquired breast implants. I assured myself it wasn't because of Brooklyn or that infamous pool incident. I was doing it because I was an independent young woman capable of making choices about my own body. If larger breasts would make me feel more confident, then why not? I had paid for them myself, well, almost. When I entered college, my parents had given me a limited allowance for the entire year. Knowing our financial situation, I understood the importance of careful budgeting. But well, you can probably guess what I did. I enrolled in college, found the nearest plastic surgeon, and scheduled an appointment. I was supposed to bring someone along to drive me home afterward, but I couldn't bring myself to confide in anyone. After all, people would eventually notice. I couldn't conceal the transformation for long. Being quite petite, my new assets were hard to miss. During that first week, I hid them beneath loose-fitting sweaters, partly because they were still bruised from the surgery and I wanted to keep them hidden until they fully healed. I shared a dorm with two other freshman girls, making it impossible for them not to notice the change. Their excited squeals filled the room as I revealed my transformation, and one of them exclaimed, "Oh girl, those guys won't be able to resist you." And they were right. Once my breasts had healed, I found the confidence to wear low-cut tops for the very first time in my life. No longer did I have to conceal my flat chest. I felt feminine, and perhaps now, I might finally find a boyfriend. Back in high school, boys hadn't shown any interest in me, and I had convinced myself it was because of my lack of curves. Well, hello boys, look at me now, and boy did they look. My shyness remained, so whenever I caught someone's gaze fixated on my new assets, I couldn't help but blush. Over time, I began to relish the attention I received. It made me feel valued and attractive. Not long after, I crossed paths with a guy named Adrian at a party. He mustered the courage to ask me out, and I excitedly accepted before darting off to find my friends to share the news. They hugged me, and together, we celebrated with a jubilant dance. It was then that I realized my abrupt departure might have been impolite, so I hurried back to the room where Adrian was. Upon my return, I couldn't spot him immediately, but then I saw him. He stood amidst a group of guys, all laughing uproariously. As I drew nearer, I discerned the reason for their amusement. Adrian held two balloons to his chest, and despite the blaring music, I could hear his mocking words clearly. "Hey, guys, I'm Lily. Do you like my fake boobs? Look at me, look at me." I was engulfed in humiliation. He had just asked me out on a date, and yet, there he was, subjecting me to ridicule in front of everyone. He proved no different from the boys I had encountered in high school. Tears welled up, and I fled the scene, running until I reached the solace of my room. How could he have possibly known they were fake? And what made him think it was acceptable to mock me behind my back like that? In an instant, I felt utterly isolated. All I yearned for was to return home to my parents, confess what I had done, and hope they would forgive me. However, I couldn't bring myself to do it. They would be furious with me, and I feared they might never want to speak to me again. The most painful part was that I had to face Adrian every day because we shared the same class. He didn't even muster the courage to approach me and apologize. I knew someone must have witnessed my tearful exit, as he never attempted to speak to me again or inquire why I had lost interest in going out with him. Because of him, I began to question myself. Had I made a terrible mistake? Why couldn't I escape this torment? I had been teased for being flat-chested, and now I was ridiculed for having implants. Would this suffering never cease? I spiraled into a deep depression. I should have mentioned earlier how much I cherished ballet. I had been taking ballet classes since childhood, but with my new implants, everything had changed. That first class post-surgery proved excruciating. I no longer felt light on my feet, and with each practice, the pain intensified. Every pirouette sent a sharp pang through my back. My ballet teacher noticed my distress and suggested that perhaps the implants were too large for my petite frame. The one thing I had believed would improve my life was, in reality, causing its destruction. Boys perceived me as shallow, I endured physical discomfort, and even my ballet teacher treated me differently. To add to my woes, I was rapidly depleting my finances. I had allocated 90% of my annual allowance to cover the surgery costs, leaving me with barely enough for food. I had no choice but to seek employment. I applied to several bookstores, but none of them offered me a position. I began to suspect that my implants were affecting my job prospects. They passed judgment on me, making assumptions about me being some kind of airhead. Eventually, I resolved to apply at a local diner. I noticed their advertisement outside and inquired about the position. To my surprise, they hired me immediately. However, it seemed that the manager's attention was solely fixated on my chest. I swear he never made eye contact with me once. The thought of working for such a man made me sick, but I was in dire need of the money. My life became an unvarying cycle of studying, working, and sleeping, all while enduring the increasing discomfort from the implants. I even resorted to seeing a chiropractor to alleviate the persistent back pain. It was a never-ending cycle, and every spare dollar I had was spent on finding a more comfortable bra to support my implants or on pain medication. Christmas was approaching, and that meant a visit to my parents. There was no way I could conceal my situation from them, and they were already upset with me because my grades had deteriorated. I couldn't admit that I had been toiling away at work instead of studying, all because I had squandered their money in a misguided attempt to boost my self-esteem. It was a complete disaster. Just before Christmas, I worked one of my last shifts at the diner for the year. I couldn't wait to escape from there. I had grown weary of my manager's relentless gaze on my chest, and this shift was no different. I had never been so upset in my entire life. All the anxieties I had harbored about people viewing me as shallow and attention-seeking resurfaced, especially since I had never experienced it to this extent before the surgery. As I walked home in the snow with tears streaming down my cheeks, I reached a pivotal decision. I resolved to confide in my parents and ask for their help in getting these foolish implants removed. Getting breast implants had been the worst decision of my life, and I could no longer endure living this way. My parents were understandably angry, but more than that, they were deeply disappointed. They were saddened that I had struggled so much with insecurity during my teenage years and hurt that I had betrayed their trust in such a manner. During that Christmas vacation, they witnessed the immense physical and emotional pain my implants were causing me, and without even needing to ask, they offered to cover the cost of their removal. I didn't hesitate for a moment. I knew it was the right decision, and I felt overwhelmingly grateful that my parents stood by me, despite how I had let them down. I can't adequately convey the sense of relief I experienced when the implants were removed, both physically and mentally. It felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted. I could breathe freely and return to practicing ballet, my true passion. I even secured a job at the library to repay my parents for the removal surgery. This time, no one paid any attention to my chest. In fact, nobody seemed to care at all. It dawned on me that my insecurity about my breast size had been self-inflicted, and genuine friends couldn't care less about their size. Getting breast implants was unquestionably the biggest mistake I've ever made. However, if I hadn't made that choice, I might not have achieved the level of happiness and self-acceptance I now enjoy. It goes to show that there's always a lesson to be learned, even if it's a painful one.